make some polite small talk, and then get out of there as fast as I could. Hello, it's Cece, back again in my knitting corner, ready to talk about the Hallmark Channel movie that premiered this past weekend. We're now into the fall harvest of 2020, so we have 5 new movies premiering, and I'm here to talk about the first one, Follow Me to Daisy Hills. As for my knitting, I'm still working on that green shawl, so decided to temper it slightly with some brown yarn. But yep, just keep knitting away at it. Alright, so Follow Me to Daisy Hills. Daisy Hills is the name of the town where this takes place, and Jo lives in Daisy Hill, where she owns and works at the general store with her father. Now, right at the very beginning, we see Jo basically giving away merchandise while her father's outside on the phone with a consultant asking him to come and save their business because it's failing. And I'm thinking, gee, I wonder why.
It wasn't easy. I was able to round some up from a wholesaler.
What did it come out to?
Almost double the last. It's getting harder to find.
I really need it, but double?
Well, they keep raising the prices on us. You know what? Just take it for now, and we can work it out once you sell your plants.
Are you sure?
Dad and I will figure it out.
Later that night, at a party for her sister, Jo's sister Sophie, it's her birthday party, the consultant shows up. The consultant is Blake, Jo's old boyfriend from high school. Now, it's been a few years. Obviously, they're adults. They have careers. But Jo is like super prickly towards Blake. I mean, she's like snapping at him that evening at the party, which I couldn't figure out. I mean, I know if a relationship ends badly, if someone leaves you, then I can understand being a little salty. But I don't know, maybe it's just where I'm from. I'm from New England. The Puritan stoicism runs deep here. We don't show our emotions so openly. So if I ran into someone who did me wrong 10 years ago, I'd plaster on a polite smile, make some polite small talk, and then get out of there as fast as I could. I wouldn't start snapping on them. Maybe it's just me. Maybe regular people do that. Get mad at people who dumped him years ago. But what gets me is that we find out later in the movie he didn't dump her, she left him. So apparently they were both planning to leave together for school when they were in high school and going to college, and at the very last second she changed her mind and stayed. So he ended up going off by himself, and I guess she's mad at him because he didn't also change his entire life to suit her whim. Didn't make any sense to me. I mean, but fortunately, Jo actually apologized to Blake the next day for being so kind of nasty to him. And I was like, thank you. Nice to see a little maturity coming from you. And then they have like an actual conversation, you know, about their lives, about what they've been doing, about their feelings, those sort of things. So a nice grown-up conversation. Anyways, so Blake is there to help save the business, and Jo pretty much fights him on everything. Every suggestion he had. At one point he goes, you know, I think you should replace these windows with energy efficient windows because you're losing a ton of money in heating costs and air conditioning costs. And she's like, what? No, that's a terrible idea. And I'm like, and the reasoning isn't that they can't afford energy efficient windows, because that's a logical explanation. Oh, because windows are a big expense. So if you can't afford to replace your windows, that's a good reason to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't afford to replace the windows. But no, it's not the expense. Her excuse is, oh, people like these windows. I'm like, girl, no one gives a care what your windows are. Get the energy efficient windows. That's a ridiculous excuse. But then we ultimately get to the crux of the issue, as Judge John Hodgman would say. The store was her mother's dream, and so her mother designed everything in the store. And so unfortunately her mother has passed away, and now Joe is holding on to everything that her mother created, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, sentimentality, and two, this reluctance to change. So once Joe realizes this for herself, then she starts to be a little more willing about the change. And she also talks a lot about how this store is sort of the heart of the community. People come in there for more than just to buy things. So they decide they're going to do a little market research by going throughout the town and speaking to everyone to find out what they do want from the store. So then there's a whole myriad of them visiting people and getting their, and some amusing scenarios occur, ultimately them getting to know everyone and getting to know what they like about the store. And then in the end, the whole store comes together, the whole town comes together to redo the store, like literally. The whole town's in there. There's like people moving things, changing things. It's pretty crazy that they're all involved. But it's Hallmark and it's a small town, and well, live your life, right? So that night, after the whole store's been redone, Joe and Blake are sitting on swings outside Joe's house, and they're talking, having a real heart-to-heart about everything that went on in their past, their future, their current state. And that's when we get our kiss, which was nice, because normally we have to wait until the last few minutes of the movie, and it's this whole big epic thing with the swell of music and all this kind of stuff. This was nice because it was casual, more realistic. They just had a crazy day that really pushed them together and bonded in a way they hadn't yet. So the kiss felt like the realistic conclusion to that day.
You're right. I would have regretted staying here.
I should go.
And I should have done this a long time ago.
However, the next day, because we're 20 minutes from the end of the movie, Blake gets a call from a company he was interviewing with in, I didn't pay attention to what city this was in again. New York, I want to say? I think he's in New York City. He does, because there was this whole big thing about him talking about where he lived. It was like Manhattan or Brooklyn or something, I don't remember. Anyways, but it was New York. So they call and they're like, hey, you got the job. We need you to start tomorrow, first thing. Because that's realistic. You call and offer someone a job and it'd be like, all right, oh, you're out of state? Great, we need you to start at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Like, aren't there like negotiations, and especially at this level, it's not like he's retail. This is, he has his own business, so I don't know why he's interviewing for another job anyway. They're like, you got the partnership, so maybe something more than just a job. That whole thing didn't really make any sense to me, but I'm not going to sleep over it. So Joe's father happened to be present when he got the call. So he tells him, and then he's like, hey, and let Joe know I just got to go take care of a few things. So Blake goes. Joe's father tells her that he's left because he got the job. And Joe freaks out, all mad at him for leaving without saying goodbye. Which, obviously that makes sense. To leave without saying goodbye is kind of a jerk move. And he consults businesses to help become better businesses. So this is basically his job. He would take off and leave a client hanging without any sort of conclusion. Though technically, I doubt they were paying him. This all seemed to be from the goodness of his heart. But still, it seemed unprofessional kind of thing to do. But Joe was also mad that he was leaving, period. And I'm like, girl, he told you that this call was going to come at some point and that he would have to leave. So why are you so mad about that? I mean, the no goodbye bit, valid. But the leaving it all, I never understand these romance heroines where they get so mad about something a guy does that's just completely irrational. I mean, it's been like 3 days. He's been around for like, what, 3 days? And now you're mad that he's going back to his life in New York City? Illogical. But then, like, not too long later, he calls her. So I take back him being a jerk for leaving without saying goodbye. He's clearly reaching out to her to say goodbye, clear up everything, all that kind of stuff. And she just proceeds to ignore the calls. You're mad at him for leaving without saying goodbye, and you won't even give him a chance to say goodbye. You won't even pick up the phone. So it's the next morning, and she's getting ready for the day, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Blake. And she's like, what are you doing here? You left. And he's like, no I didn't. And she's like, yeah you did. You got that call yesterday. He's like, no, I didn't leave. And if you'd answered any of your phone calls, you would have known that. And I'm like, ooh, burn. Yeah. Way to go, Joe. Mountain out of a molehill with that one. He freaked out about him leaving, mad that he'd left without saying goodbye, and the truth is he hadn't got anywhere. He was just taking care of some things, like he told her father he was. He never actually left. And he's like, no, I'm not leaving. The things I need to take care of is I've decided I'm going to move back to Daisy Hills and run the store with you. And I just needed to get the ball rolling on selling my apartment, shipping my stuff here, and all that kind of stuff. And then they kiss and happily ever after. The end. So, completely realistic and normal scenario. The setting, fall. It took place in fall. This is a fall harvest movie. At last we had a movie that lined up with the season it was in, so that was nice. And also I felt the costume designer and the set designer, man, they just really leaned into that whole fall thing. Everything was brown, orange, red, gold. Like they just were like, all right, here's our color scheme, fall, and we're just going to put everything in these colors. And there's also a lot of plaid. But I'm not mad about it. No, didn't mind it. I love committing to a color scheme, so good for them. We've got our main characters. We had Jo. She is sort of your stereotypical heroine in these movies, where she's a complete control freak that won't let anyone help her and can't let go of anything outside of her own control in her own way. Though I did mention at one point, the whole apologizing the next day for being snippy with Blake. That was a refreshing change. At least she had the maturity to recognize that she was being a jerk the night before and apologized for it. So that was unexpected. But otherwise, she was very much a trope of the genre that I am sick and tired of seeing. Blake, he's the big city guy in the small town, which just like Love on Harbor Island didn't make any sense because it was his small town. He was from there. So every suggestion he made for the store, Joe would throw back and be like, because he was like, some suggestions for change. He's like, you should move the candy to next to the cash register because people will impulse buy candy when they're checking out. The energy efficient windows. What was the other one? Another one he suggested. Not stocking items that don't sell or only sell once a year. You sell one a year. Maybe not devote a lot of shelf space to them. And she just freaks out about him on his, she's like, you're from a big city, you don't understand this community, you don't understand the needs of people. And I'm like, okay, because only people in cities will be standing in a checkout line and think, you know what would make this a little more pleasant? Your peppermint patty. Because I guess small town people are just have such strong self-control. They never buy candy at the cash register. And oh gosh, I can't ever get the energy efficient windows. Ridiculous. It was completely, that made no sense to me whatsoever. And I think Blake felt the same way. But he was very patient with her and her insanity. And in the end they got there. So I guess that's that. Oh, I should mention, and then there was no meet cute because obviously they already knew each other, high school sweethearts and all that jazz. And they meet at the they see each other for the first time at the party, and her sister and father are present, so it's not like it's some cute interaction or interesting or feisty. It's just like, yeah, kind of standard. So moving on to the secondary characters, I'm not going to cover a lot of them because honestly, you know, a lot of the townspeople were involved in this movie, but the only characters that really had a lot of screen time were with Joe's family, especially her sister Sophie. Her sister Sophie had her own sort of separate plot line going on, secondary plot for a secondary character, because she's a senior in high school, so she's applying to colleges, and she'd applied to a couple of colleges, a local college, and since her dream is to become a writer, she also applied to a big state school known for its excellent writing program. But that would require her moving far away. So now she's facing this decision about where she wants to go to school, because she wants to stay around and help her family, especially after her father has a heart attack. That pretty much makes up her mind for her that she's going to stay around, go to local school, and stay with her family. Well, Joe, you know, who made the same decision when she was her age, doesn't want her doing the same thing. Not because Joe thought she made a mistake, but Joe's like, no, that was right for me. You need to do what's right for you, and that's go to this big state school. So there's actually this, so Sophie had already sent a letter refusing the acceptance to the big state school when, I think it was Iowa State? It was Iowa State, I think. To Iowa. And I don't even know what town this takes. Well, I know, Daisy Hills, but I don't even know where that is. So maybe they're in Iowa. They just kept talking about it like it was really, really, really far away. Maybe that's because it's like more than an hour? I don't know. They're probably in the Midwest somewhere, so it's probably like, but it's probably a long drive. So she sent her letter of refusal to Iowa State. And in the most hilarious scene, it's not meant to be hilarious. It's meant to be heartwarming and touching and dramatic. But it was so ridiculous. I thought it was hysterical. Joe is drinking and reading this story that Sophie wrote about the store and her family, and so she calls the school at like night and a little bit drunk and leaves this long sobbing message about how they have to accept her and to ignore the letter, and they have to see this story that she wrote because she's going to be this great writer. And then Joe sends the story to the school, but she doesn't actually email it to them. She posts it to their page, which I don't even know how you can do that or understand any of the, like, post what page? Their web page? Their Facebook page? Like, it's never made clear exactly how this story is posted anywhere or how she would have the permission to do so. But it immediately goes viral, which also doesn't make any sense to me, but sure. And then the next morning the school calls and they're like, yes, we've read the story, she absolutely can come here. And I'm like, that's not how any of this works. She was already accepted. They already knew she was good enough to get in and that her writing was good enough. So there was no need for her to send them the story and to beg them to let her in. She'd already gotten in. She just needed to be like, hey, we've changed our mind about denying the acceptance. We do want to come here. Or she does want to come here. I'm sure that happens in schools all the time. I mean, maybe not all the time, but I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it happens. Someone refuses because they can't get the funds, but then they get a scholarship or something, and they're like, yeah, no, I'm coming. And they probably have a whole process for that, where a wait list, or if you have to like reapply, I don't know how that works, but I'm sure it's not uncommon. You don't send a sobbing call and then post a viral story to their webpage. It's just, the whole scene, the whole part was just completely ridiculous. But I'll suspend, you have to suspend all sort of logic when you're watching these movies. So just some final comments or thoughts I had about this movie. So there was this one scene when they're at this farm, talking to Henry, he's one of the farmers, about the store, doing our market research, and he was carving a piece of wood. And they're like, oh, that's beautiful. Do you have any more? And he's like, yeah, sure. And he opens up the barn doors, and there's just like all these wood carvings everywhere. And I'm like, ooh, Henry, same. If anyone's ever like, ooh, that's a really pretty lace shawl you're knitting, and I'm like, you want to see the hundreds of more that I have stashed away? It's not hundreds, but still. Girl's got a problem. Then there was this one scene where they're in an attic dancing to a record that they found. Apparently their song they danced to at their prom in high school, which supposedly was only 10 years ago. I've never heard this song. It's not a popular song. Clearly it was probably written for the movie or something they could get rights to, but not anything anyone danced to at a prom 10 years ago, or in the past 20, 30 years. But again, suspend logic. Blake's like, you gotta do the thing. She's like, the thing? He's like, yeah, come on, do the thing. She's like, oh no, I can't do the thing. He's like, do the thing, do the thing. So I kept waiting for something to happen. And he like takes her and like spins her into his arms and they start dancing. And apparently that was the thing. Instead of just stepping into his arms, she turned into his arms. That was the thing. I was like.
Hey, can you still do the thing?
Which thing?
You know the thing. You can do it.
Oh, the thing. Okay.
Well, that was a lot of build-up for absolutely nothing. There was also a really funny scene in the car where she was trying to get out if he had a girlfriend, and he calls her on it immediately because she's like, oh, how does your girlfriend feel about that? And he's like, are you just trying to find out if I have a girlfriend? So that was kind of funny.
Is your girlfriend okay with you being such a micromanager?
Are you trying to find out if I have a girlfriend?
No, just making small talk.
Oh.
And now my final thoughts on this movie. I mean, I didn't hate it, but I didn't particularly like it either. Kind of forgettable. Unremarkable. I'd say this is the perfect kind of movie to put on in the background if you are cleaning, doing laundry, cooking, that kind of stuff. Something you don't really have to pay attention to, so it doesn't really matter if it's good or not. It's not the kind of make popcorn and sit down and give your full attention to kind of movie. Not at all. Alright, and with that, I'm going to leave you. So stay safe this week, and if you can afford it, get energy efficient windows. The environment and your wallet will thank you in the end.